Hey guys, in this video we'll be doing a deep dive into how to build Vi in Season 14. We'll be talking about Bruiser, Assassin, Tank. We're going to cover them all, runes, what components to buy first. I think this is going to be really helpful. Many people have been asked about this video. It's finally here. Let's go. So let's start off with Bruiser build because that's the most popular build and what you want to be doing in most cases. And to me, you got 4 different options when it comes to first item. And I'm going to go over when you want to do which. So let's start with Trinity Forest because it's the obvious all-rounder and it's the most popular build, and it's also doing very well when it comes to stats, win rate and pick rate. But this to me is what you want to be doing when everything's very basic, your team, enemy team comp. You can kind of get the autos in, you can do extended fights, but you can also be a little bit of a frontline for your team. It's just overall a great item. Can't miss with this one. So the other first item you can go is Black Cleaver. It's going to offer a lot of the same. It gives everything Vi wants, which is AD, HP, and haste. she loves that. But it's going to give a little bit less damage. I've been doing some damage tests and all of this in practice tool. It does quite a bit less damage, and it's also going to slow down your clear speed, which is why I don't recommend this for every game. But if the enemy team is building a lot of armor, your team has a lot of AD damage. Another thing is that if you're behind and your team is doing really well, but it's going to come into team fights, you're not really getting that second item very early. You might be wanting to go Black Cleaver first. If you just notice you're falling behind, you more wants to be like utility and just frontline for your team because that's all you need. And you're not going to carry this one. You can go Black Cleaver first because it's cheaper for the first, and also if you don't getting the second item, if you're getting second item very late, you're not going to have the armor shred for the team and the utility and the HP, so that's one option. The third option you got is Thunder Sky. Many has been moving away from this item because it got the nerfs, but the nerfs in my opinion was not that severe, so it's still a great item. When you don't want to go Trinity Force, you're more likely to go Black Cleaver or Thunder Sky. What's going to determine when you go which is pretty much come down to, do you need armor shred? Then you go Black Cleaver. If it's more about burst and not sustained damage, then you also want to go Thunder Sky because it has that one proc, right? If you're not getting in that much autos, it's going to be very short fights with a lot of bursts. You're not going to be able to get actually off a lot of shred in those fights. You're better off with Thunder Sky. I'm going to show some different types of team comps when you're going to go which. Black Cleaver, you're more likely to go against tankier, more melee. You can actually stick on and fight them for a longer time. Thunder Sky, you got the burst. So the fourth option you got is actually Eclipse. It's a Bruiser item because it gives you actually a lot of HP. It's very cheap, and you can easily go this into other Bruiser items like in a Black Cleaver or a Trinity Force or a Thunder Sky. It's so good as a first item. It gives you so much AD, a lot of damage on those early fights, and when ganking, it gives you a lot of clear speed. It's absolutely amazing for Vi. It's so cheap, so you get a really early power spike too, which can be really insane in solo queue. So when you want to go this, if you want the burst and dueling power, it's not going to be that much team fighting, but there are more assassins in the game, more mobility in the game. You want that burst, more skirmishing, not that big front to back team fights. Then I really like Eclipse, and Eclipse is one of my favorite items, as you may know if you follow my stream. So Eclipse is absolutely amazing. It's very hard to to say that one item is better than the other. It's more up to what is the scenario, what is going on in that current game, what are the enemy team comp, what are your team comp. Do you need HP, do you need damage, do you want burst, or do you want sustained damage? So that's why I made him on each side here. Eclipse and Thunder Sky leans more towards burst. They're not going to be that long auto. You're not going to be able to auto attack it that much. Maybe the enemy team has a lot of movement speed, maybe there's a lot of CC. If not, you're going to be able to get off multiple auto attacks and long fights. Trinity Force and Black Cleaver is going to do great. Short, just before you continue, I just wanted to tell you that I made a visual image of the Bruiser decision making progress and the items so that you can kind of see it for yourself, and something you can have on the side before you go into in-game, for example. If you find this useful, I'm going to make one for also decision making progress between Assassin, Tank, Bruiser, and I can also make an own one for the Assassin build. So please comment if this is something you think could be useful. And at the end, I'll reveal my personal favorite build at the moment, but for now, let's get back to the video. So let's talk about how to actually build those items, because that's I see a lot of mistakes here. So you want to start off, but that's going to be common denominator for every item pretty much. You want to build long swords. You want AD, especially in the early game, because you want damage on the gank. You don't want them to survive with 10 HP, 50 HP. Those kind of differences is really big in the beginning. The HP is not going to do that much. AD is also going to help you clear faster, which means you can be at a certain timing at a certain when you need to. So you want to start off with building maybe triple longsword, double longsword. Then you want to build a phage, and then you want to build a hardbound axe. But if you have phage and you can afford 2 longsword and you have enough for Sheen, then you go Sheen, then the hardbound axe with the attack speed, and then you finish Trinity Force. If not, you're building phage, the longswords, then you can build this if that's all you can afford. There's no point buying a glowing moat. Yeah, don't bother, build this. And then you're building the Sheen, Trinity Force, done. So onto the Black Cleaver, it's going to be the same. You want to start off with longsword. If you can afford a ruby crystal, you build the ruby crystal, and then you're building the phage before you build the coldfinger hammer. If you have phage, double longsword, you're better off buying ruby crystal than you are building the coldfinger hammer. It's gonna give you 10 haste for 400 gold. It's absolutely dog shit. Don't do it. Build the ruby crystal, then you finish Black Cleaver. If you can if you don't have slots, of course, if you not have enough space, build a coldfinger hammer. Not that big deal, but generally you want to build phage, the components, and phage, finish it off. So Sun and Sky, same here. You want to build long swords. You're gonna want to build the tunnel before the coldfinger hammer, and then you complete the item. Eclipse. Here, if you can build pickaxe, build a pickaxe after full clear, and Scuttle Crab, you're gonna have enough for pickaxe instead of a double longsword. That's gonna be great because that's also gonna make the packs later easier too, because if you go first back, get a double longsword, it's going to be maybe hard to get a pickaxe next back unless you get a kill or 2. So if you can get a pickaxe, get the pickaxe, then you build a longsword. You're better off building pickaxe, triple longsword, than finishing the coldfield hammer, and then you complete the Eclipse. So let's talk about the Trinity Force build, what you want to round out the build with, what's going to be a second item, third, fourth, what are the options here. A lot of this is going to be the same for the 4 different first items type of builds, but not every time. So Black Cleaver is probably going to be the most popular second item here. People are getting a lot of armor just naturally from leveling out the game, but also itemize is very common. If people are getting some armor, Black Cleaver is going to be great. It just gives you everything I want, as I talked about. But yeah, so most cases you want to go Black Cleaver second. The times you don't want to do that is if the enemy team is building 0 armor. There's more leaning towards burst, but not quite the Eclipse and Sun and Sky first item kind of build. You're gonna go Sun and Sky second. If you're really snowballing, you can go Eclipse second. It's gonna be quite squishy, but you have a lot of burst. If you're really snowballing, really ahead, you're carrying, you're making picks all over, you're playing against pretty squishy teams, you can blow them up with this. This is going to be a really good snowballing build, so this is an option. Keep it in mind. Outside of those second items, you're going to have outliers like Maw. It can be great if you're facing a lot of magic damage, or if the enemy team maybe has like 2 AP assassins who are really fed. The AD champs on the enemy team is really behind it. That don't really matter. You really want Maw. Let's say they have a fed Akali and a fed Nidalee mid jungle. The rest of the enemy team is doing really poorly. You're going to do great with the Maw second item. It's so good. It's absolutely absurd. 70 ADs, 15 haste, 40 magic resist, and you're going to have at least 400 to 700 AD or magic shield. And then also with the new changes to Lifeline, which offers you Omnivamp instead of Lifesteal. This is absolutely bonkers change to Vi. This item is so good. I can't even understate it. So if you need magic resist, build Maw. Another option you can do, I don't recommend it very often, but you can. If you're the only frontline, you really need to just be tanky and survive that burst. You're gonna just ult in and you know you're gonna die. You just want to stay alive as long as possible and be annoying and help out your team. You can do Sterek second. I don't really like this item anymore until like later on. It's not gonna do a whole lot because It's only 400 HP. It offers no resistance. It offers very low AD in the early game as a second item because it scales off base AD, and vice base AD is actually really low on average. So only until later you're gonna get value from the AD. Like early second item, you might get like 40 AD. It's really shitty for such an expensive item. You're only getting tenacity, which is can be good, but not every case. If you really need the tenacity, you just need to be tanky. Only just tank burst, and they're not really leaning towards either AD or AP. Sterx, you can build this second item, but don't recommend it very often. So then we really need to talk about Randuins, because Randuins is such an insane item this season. You have no idea. There's crit is so good, like 80 carries, and there's a lot of 80 carries in other roles too. Like in mid, you see Tristanas, you see Akshans all around. There's a lot of AD champions at the moment, and especially towards crit. So if you just need to be tanky for a team, you're the main front line, you're not really snowballing that hard. Enemy team has like double crit champion, maybe triple. You can build this second item and you're gonna be fine. Usually I tend to do Black Cleaver first, but you can do this if it offers a lot of value. And especially if you're sort of behind and you just need to be tanky and there's a lot of team fighting going on. So now you kind of know when you want to go with second item, but if you're building Trinity Force Black Cleaver, let's say, if you're starting to need a lot of armor, I recommend the Randuins in most cases. What you can do is that you can opt into Frozen Heart if the enemy team is not building crit, but they're more on-hit champions like Kalista, Akshan, and building on it, and maybe they have a Gwen or a Diana, and the attack speed is slow is actually going to help them out too, or they have a Jax, which is not building crit, but is very reliant on auto attacks. But if there's crit at all, you're better off with Randuins, because it's just a better item now. Frozen Heart is nerfed a lot of times, but against on-hit and champions who don't build crit, Frozen Heart is going to be better. If you need magic resistance instead and not quite armor yet, because the fed enemies, the fed on the enemy carries are doing magic damage, and you need magic resist, you're gonna do really great Moth third item. And if you really just need to be tankier, you can do Kenny Kruger, but in my opinion, Maw is just such a good item. You're better off with Maw, and you can fill in with Kenny Kruger if you really need to. And unless you're playing against a lot of poke, if you're playing against a lot of poke, Kenny Kruger can do better than Maw. But in general, I recommend Maw before Kenny Kruger. You can do both if you really need to. You also have the option of going Spirit Visage, but in my opinion, unless you have an enchanter who's healing you a lot, and you have maybe like Ocean Soul, and you're playing more like Eclipse on the Sky, you can do Spirit Visage, and it's gonna have a lot of value. But in my opinion, you're better off with Maw and Kenny Kruger in most cases. Maybe you have a Soraka, then you can think about it. But I don't think I think I've built Spirit Visage one time this season in like 200 games. I'm not sure how much I played, probably more, but yeah, you get the point. If you want a nice anti-burst item, you can build Death Dance. This Death Dance is kind of a weird item. It's giving you a lot of great stats on Vi right now. It's been buffed lately, and it's doing a lot better. I was saying just no at the start of the season. Now it's a lot better. It's giving you way more stats and better healing. So if you are in a game which there's a lot of burst, and it's very volatile, both sides are very squishy, then you can go Death Dance, because if you know you're going to get the reset, it's going to offer you a lot of tankiness, especially if the enemy team has a lot of AD damage. So if you're playing against playing against assassins, like I said, talents, you're playing against maybe a Samira or more like of those burst champions, but you know you can get a reset with your team comp in most cases, especially if you're behind. Death Dance is great, because I recommend Death Dance more if you're ahead, because then you know you can get resets. If you're behind, you're kind of just dying and buying a little bit too little of stats. So yeah, that's Death Dance. So these are pretty much the item I like to juggle with. You got Maw if you need MR, you got Randuin's if you need crit, you got Frozen Heart if you're playing against on hit. You can fill up with Thunder Sky because Thunder Sky is really great into later team fights, and you can also build GA. I've bought it. I've started building it a couple of times, but I've actually not finished it. It's very rare I'm able to use Guardian Angel. It's kind of just too expensive. It's not giving you the stopwatch anymore, so it's a lot worse. And in solo queue, where there is so much chaos, maybe you just get picked off and it's going to be completely useless. But if you're maybe, for example, building towards a death dance, you already got the components, you know there's going to be a really big team fight coming that's going to decide the game. Maybe there's a soul coming up, there's Elder or a Baron, which you know is going to decide the game. You're really good off with GA. Or if maybe you're very ahead, it's all about just staying alive. You got a big bounty, you just want to make sure you don't make a big mistake. You're probably going to be able to do okay if they put you into reset. GA can be worth buying, but for most cases, don't think about this item. So let's talk about a few items which some has been asking me about, and that's Overlords. Overlords is just not worth buying, sadly. I really wish I could make this item work, because HP and AD is what I want, but it's kind of giving it the wrong way, because if you're going to build this much HP, you're not going to have any resistance. And let's say you're building Trinity Force Black Cleaver and you want to go Overlords, you're going to have so much HP, but you're also going to melt to stuff like Leandris and these kind of bird items and Bork and so on. And there's a lot of percentage damage in the game right now, and you have no resistance, and not having balance between HP and resistance is not great. But the biggest issue is actually that it increases your damage based on missing health, and it's not what Y wants, because you want all your stats up front. That's something I talked about in the item analysis in season 14 when it hit. This kind of stuff comes down to also like Force of Nature, for example, which ramps up. So that's not what you want on Y. You want all the stats when you're doing the combos as fast as possible, because Y can't kite and go in and out and poke and kind of stay in combat in the same way as other champions can, like a Lilia, who has to burn, that makes her always stay in combat, just fighting when she's low. It's not like a Kayn who's really sustaining when it's low. As Y, you want to go in with a Q, you do a combo, you max out your damage, and then you get low, but then you're not really doing the damages, you know? So it's kind of counterintuitive, and that way it's not going to have the best synergy with Y. You can't do it like a very, very late item, like a 5th or a 6th item. But in most cases, I've looked at it, you're going to be better off, as I said, with building a Sun and Sky 5th item in the team fight, for example, than the Overlords. And but yeah, that's my opinion on it. It's not a great item. Don't think about this item. You can think about it as a 6th item. That's my best advice, but make sure you got the resistance. You can swap it out for like Sun and Sky in that build, but yeah, both cases I don't think you should concern yourself with it. Just pray that they change it. I doubt it, but yeah. When you get to a late game like this, you're actually just better off with Sterex in most cases. It's going to give you more tankiness and almost the same AD and tenacity, and it's just way more reliable. And so that's it. You're going to be better off with either Sterex as a 6th item, or even Jackstraw. Like, I've also talked about Jackstraw before, because that's kind of the ramp up item, but in the very late game, it's just too good. So as a 6th item, this can actually work, even though it's not perfect for Vi. It just gives you that much stats as a very late item. So that's actually worth. It's kind of similar to the Overlords, but it has more synergy because it just offers more stats, and it's not gonna have the drawbacks like being low when you're fighting and so on. So this is actually a decent 6th item, but don't think about it before, okay? Maybe 5th. So you also got Thornmail. I've not talked about it yet because it's not something you buy very often. In my opinion, the better healing reduction items are just buying Executioner and then building your normal items, but don't finish your Executioner. Okay, so Thornmail can be worth if you build their full AD. You're building a lot of armor, then you actually get a lot of synergy, and there are a lot of auto attackers, and you need anti-heal, then you can build this, but that's going to be very rare, and that's the only cases I recommend building this. You also got items like Titanic Hydra. Those people are a big fan of, but in the same way as Overlord, I just don't think you're that well off building Titanic Hydra. I'm sorry, I don't like it. I never built this. I tried it quite a lot because I wanted to make it work, but it just doesn't offer enough. It gives you AD, it gives you health, but that's it. No sort of utility to speak of. You got the auto reset, but you already have 2 of those, so you don't really need the third one. That's very rarely going to be better than some of what the other items are giving you right now. When I look at this build, for example, as a full build, there's no way I change any of these items with this one, unless, yeah, if the aim is you don't need more, for example, against the anti-resist, you're better off just building an armor item, a second armor item, like a death dance or whatever. So, yeah, not a big fan of this item. I don't recommend it. Got Hexblade, yeah, just not good enough, sadly. Don't like it. And also, still, don't build Sunfire. I'm begging. It's just not good enough. It's worse than the other armor items for a champion like Vi. It's more if you need wave clear, and you don't need wave clear. So that's it. Then you're gonna have some options when it comes to actually supportive items, and this is not something people think about quite a lot. And you're gonna have Zeke's. It's okay. I built it once, twice. It's not like insane, but if you just need a cheap item, this is all you can afford. You're only just like ulting in and kind of dying. This is gonna be fine, but I don't build this very often, but it's something you can keep in mind and test a bit. Then you have Knight's Vow. If you're just very much a supportive, you got one champion who's really fed, and you just want to let him carry, try to protect him. It's really fed Caitlyn or Jinx or Samira or an assassin who's mega fed. You can actually build Knight's Vow in those cases, and if you're just sort of behind, you just want a cheap item to get going. You're not really carrying. You can actually build Knight's Vow. It's going to be really good. It's just so cheap. Support items are so broken. And then finally you got Locket, which is also a really cheap, great tank item, which you can build, for example, after Trinity Force Black Cleaver. You can actually go Locket the third. This is, I very often do this against Karthus. Locket is just so good against Karthus, and especially if the enemy team has a lot of AoE and in general, I might buy this from time to time actually when I think it's really good in that game. So it's something to think about, but it's not going to be your every game item. In most cases, your build will look like Trinity Force, Black Cleaver, maybe a Sunder Sky if you don't really need the armor or the MR. You're kind of snowballing, you just want the HP damage. If you want armor, Radwins, MR, Maw, Organic Rukern, you got Sunder Sky, you got Death Dance Complement. Don't build these items. Most cases you can build a Sterex if you really need to in the cases I talked about. So this pretty much sums up the Bruiser, especially if you're going Trinity Force second, Trinity Force first item I mean. Let's talk about what the differences is between the other builds. So if you're not building Trinity Force first item, this other stuff doesn't really change that much. It's pretty much the same ideas for every single build, but I'm going to talk about the second item that complements your first item a little bit. So if you want to build Black Cleaver first because the enemy team has a lot of armor, they're building armor early, you're kind of behind, you want utility as I talked about, then you can go Trinity Force second, but in my opinion, in most cases you want Black Cleaver first. You don't really want Trinity Force in general, so I really like to finish it off with Eclipse or Sunder Sky, or onto the other option as I talked about later, in the same way as you would Trinity Force, just starting off with Black Cleaver, you're kind of skipping Trinity Force. The same principle applies for the rest of the items. Everything I talked about with those items rounding out the Trinity Force build, same applies here. It's the same ideas. It's just that you skip the Trinity Force, but you can do Trinity Force second because you decided to build Black Cleaver because you really need the shred really early and make sure you had it before team fights. you can go 24-second, that's totally fine. Many might be concerned about the damage difference between Black Cleaver and Trinity Force, that you could argue Black Cleaver is cheaper. That's why it's better, because you kind of get, but I've tested all of this and done the Black Cleaver and the Longsword, which is actually more gold than the Trinity Force. You're still going to do less damage. Even if the enemy team has 100 armor, I checked on 100 armor targets, it's still going to do more damage with Trinity Force, so it's not going to do more damage. But if you need Black Cleaver, go Black Cleaver first. In most cases, I go Black Cleaver first. I tend to do Sun and Sky because it's kind of those type of games. You want the tankiness, you want the shred, you want the sustain. I like Sun and Sky a lot, actually. So when you're building Sun and Sky first, it's pretty much when you don't need the armor shred that early, as I talked about. I don't recommend filling it out with Trinity Force. It doesn't make sense, and you're better off building it first item. There's very rarely you're going to build Sun and Sky first and then you want Trinity Force second. It doesn't really make sense. But yeah, very often you're going to want to go turn Sky into Black Cleaver, into following up your build like I talked about with the other item. So the other option is to go Eclipse second. I'm more likely to go either Eclipse or Black Cleaver second, follow up with Turn Sky. That's pretty much because these items synergize, or they're good in the same scenarios when you only want burst. That's pretty much it. But very often they're going to be building some armor starting into your second item. You're really going to do really well with Sun Sky and Black Cleaver in those team fights. So the rest of the build is the same as Trinity Force. So finally, Eclipse. There's a lot of the same here. If you're going Eclipse first because you want a lot of damage early, you don't need a tankiness, it's kind of flipped. Then I very often do Eclipse into Sun Sky, or I do Eclipse into Black Cleaver if I need the shred. It's all the same, guys. So you can also do Eclipse into Trinity Force because you really wanted the Eclipse for the dueling power, the damage, and just hitting that spike very early. And maybe you're playing as another Eclipse abuser. That's when you want to build Eclipse actually more often, because if the enemy champion is building Eclipse first item and you're building Trinity Force, he's going to have a 500 gold gap there, which you need to close in order to have the same power. Because if you're building, if you're equal in the game, it's going to hit his power spike almost 2 kills before you, and then it's going to have a large window where you can actually do a lot and you can't really fight him at all, because finishing Eclipse versus not finishing a Trinity Force is like such a big difference. You have no chance. So that's some of the cases, and I don't really hate to buy Eclipse together with Trinity Force. You got a lot of burst and damage. You're really leaning into that damage. That's fine. But in most cases, I do Eclipse into Black Cleaver or Sun Sky, because either I want the shred or I want the tankiness and burst from Sun Sky, which is also what Eclipse gives you. The rest of the build is the same as I talked about with the other items. So that pretty much covers the Bruiser items. If you have any questions about any items, something I didn't talk about, please let me know. I'm happy to answer. I'll give you the full answer. But for now, let's move on to the next build. So I had to go next day in order to cover the assassin builds, but we're finally here. It's such a fun build. If you haven't played this much, I really recommend you do so. Maybe you're not comfortable with it being that squishy, but I really think you should try it, because you got to expand on what you don't know and get comfortable with it, because in some positions you can really take over with Vi if you know how to play this build correctly. So I think you got 3 options. 2 of them is what I usually go for. You got Opportunity Start, which is more of a full lethality build. You can opt into crit later on, but then you got the Eclipse into crit build, and then you got Collector, which is more of a full crit build. This is my least favorite because it's a little bit slow, it's a little bit expensive, and you don't really get going and snowballing the way you want to with this kind of a build. It's a high risk, high reward. If you get ahead, you can really start to snowball, but it's a little bit slow. You get those really cheap items with so much damage. You can go quickly into the next item, that's really take away the game. So opportunities, the difference between these is if you can land a lot of autos, there's a lot of melees, and you can blow people up and land autos. They're not too much CC. There's not too much mobility. I think Collector is really good, but for the most part, I think it's the scenarios where you like Collector. you're better off starting with Eclipse. It's going to have a much better power spec at one item, much better dueling power. Collector is only really to one shot, and when you're already winning those 1v1s. But then you got Opportunity, which offers the movement speed, which is really nice, and more lethality, so you're really gonna one-shot those squishes. So if the enemy teams are more squishy and have more mobility and it's hard to reach, then I recommend Opportunity. If they're more melee focused, you can still one-shot them, better for dueling, and you are able to reach them in a different way, sort of like imagine Caitlyn here, and you got more of a Samira, and you got Kindred, Caitlyn, Xerath on this build, and then on the other you got more like champs like Lee Sin, which is still really squishy, Samira, and these kind of champions where they're more up close and you can really fight them and not worry about getting into range. So to follow up, let's start with Opportunity build. I gonna go over to the lethality items. Let's see, armor penetration, where are you? There you are. So okay, first let's talk about how to build those items. When you're starting with this, you always go for the Dirks, because the Dirks are broken. If you have enough gold for it, go for the Dirk. But many times if you just full clear and get no ganks in, and you can take the scuttle and want to reset because you want to get back up for your respawning camps, there's not really any ganks around, then you can reset, get the retricks, because then you gotta have 900 gold, and this is a really good item too. This is one of the major benefits of playing a lethality build. They have much better components than the Bruiser builds. So this is really when you spike, when you hit the Dirks and the retricks, you're so much better off than on the Bruiser items. So both of them are incredible, but if you can't afford the Dirk, you go to Dirk. It's one of the better spikes you can have in the game, getting that 1000 back and getting the Dirk, where 1300 after a gank and a full clear, for example, then you can take Dirk and boots. It's a really strong. For the Eclipse, I talked about this, the pickaxe, then you buy the long swords, and many times you can have a lot of gold and you get the boots, triple longsword and pickaxe. You don't get the coldfield hammer, then you complete it. For the collector, you want to try to get the BF, because it's really hard to get a good back for BF. So if you have 1300 or more, you go for the BF. If not, you start building the Dirk, but you go for the cloak last, unless it's like a very important fight coming up and you need just as much stats as you possibly want, and you still want to buy this, then you can go for the cloak. But I recommend trying to get the BF sword first, because it's going to be so hard to get it back, good back in later. As for follow-up items, you got a few options. I'm a really big fan of going Opportunity and Yomus, actually, to get so much move speed in the games where Opportunity is good. Usually Yomus is also really good, but maybe you don't need that extra move speed. But if you get ahead with these two items, you can just run around the entire map and one-shot people all the time, just take over. You're going to be everywhere at once. It's really strong. So I'm a big fan of this. If not, you can go Collector second, or you can go this build as a Opportunity, Yomus, then Collector third. Then you got a couple of options where if they're not building any armor yet, or like big armor stackers, then you can go for another lethality item, which I'm really big fan of Edge of Night if they have some important spells that you really want to dodge, like a Janan Tornado or anything that can pretty much stop your engage or interrupt your Qs and stuff. Edge of Night is going to be great, or like anti-combos against for example, the Nidalee, who can't land the Q, so she can't do the combo, or LeBlanc, for example. It's also going to be really good against those. You also got, and then you also got options like Voltaic Blade. People overlook this item quite a bit, in my opinion. If they really got a lot of mobility, and you know if that you can get them, then you can just one-shot. I really like this item against, for example, Lilia and Kalista. If they're on the same team, they got another enchanters really fast, like a Janna, Kalista, and they got a Lilia in the jungle, or a Kindred, for example. I really like Voltaic Blade. You can even go this first in some games, but I really like Opportunity into Voltaic Blade in those cases. So this is something to think about, but unless it's that kind of a game, I don't usually go for this item. It's more of an optional item. And then if if the enemy is building armor, you got three options. Of course, you got Lord Dominic's, Mortal Miner, and you got Cyrilla. And in this build, I do prefer Lord Dominic's and Yomus, because when building this much damage, it's very rare they actually get in any healing in. Like, even if they do have a lot of healing, you're usually just one-shotting them. It doesn't matter if they have healing, because they're not gonna have the time to regen it up again. So most of the time, I usually go for Lord Dominic's or Cyrilla. It kind of depends. If you really need as much pen as possible, you can go for Lord Dominic's, or if you need the pen early, then I like the Lord Dominic's, for example. If you're going into an opportunity into collector, and then they're really getting that armor early, and you don't really have enough lethality yet, then I think Lord Dominic's is better than Yomus. No, Cyrilla, I mean. But if you got a lot of lethality, let's say you went opportunity collector Edge of Night, and then you want the armor pen, then you can go for this Cyrilla, because then you're gonna have so much lethality. It just got buffed, so it's giving you a lot of pen as well. You get the haste also, which you don't get from Lord Dominic's. So this is when this is going to be really good. But yeah, then you got a few options like Serpent's Fang, but that's more of an anti-shield item. It's very niche. You're gonna only buy it when the enemy has a lot of shields, like they have a Karma, they have maybe a Lee Sin, an Eclipse champion in top lane, or a Riven, Yone, this kind of stuff. Who's building maybe Shibo, then you can build a Serpent's Fang. If not, you're better off with items that give you more damage. You also got the chance of doing Umbral Glaive, which I haven't been using that much lately, because I just want as much damage as possible, because this build is all about having enough damage to absolutely one-shot. But if you have enough damage, then it's nice to build utility. So if I'm kind of on the verge, I don't know if I can one-shot or not, I'm not really ahead, I'm not really behind, then I tend to go for raw damage. And if I'm really ahead, I know I'm going to one-shot anyways, because I got so much gold, then I like to go for utility items like Edge of Night and Voltaic Blade and Umbral Glaive and so on. So that's really how I do that. So Aximark, I don't really see this item being worth buying. It's more of a win more item. I don't like it. It's very rare that it has any value or gonna win you the game. Most of the time it's more of you get 3 kills. It doesn't matter if you get the 4th, it's not going to change the game. Having enough damage for those first 3 kills is what's going to actually make the difference. So I'm not a huge fan of this item. Most of the time you got so much damage, it's all about connecting the Q and the autos, and not so much about the ultimate. Then it's more about being Bruiser and engage, and then you're better off with a tankier build than Assassin, in my opinion. So other than that, I think you got options like Death Dance and Maw, naturally. These are going to be, as I said, when you're really ahead, you don't need that raw damage, as much damage as possible, like with an opportunity, a collector, and a ghost blade, and just flat out damage. Then you can go for the death dance to really get that tankiness. I really like it as a 5th or a 6th item, because you have so much damage, you're very likely to get the reset, and then you have the tankiness to do so if you make a mistake. Then I'm a big fan of this. Or go for the Maw, because it's giving you 70 AD. Who knows why they did this. And you're going to be tanky against another AP assassin, for example, where you're both squishy. You got the Maw, you're going to win that every time. So this is pretty much how I build Assassin Vi when I'm going. So when going Eclipse and you want to follow up with Assassin, I like to build Eclipse into Crit. I like to go Eclipse into Collector. You can do some other stuff, but this is what I like to do. You get that raw damage, really good fighting power. It's really Crit and Eclipse makes sense, because it's when you're melee, it's about your auto attacks also. It's not only about the ultimate and the Qs like it is with more of a full lethality build. Here it's more about getting the Q, but then also getting in the autos and the big crits with your W and E, and that's really gonna do some massive damage. So I like to actually go Eclipse Collector, and then I either go for just Infinity Edge if they're not building any armor, or I go for the Lord Dominic's and then into the Infinity Edge. Then you have, as I talked about, more of these utility items if you need so, where you see them fit. So if you got Eclipse Collector, you can go for Death Dance 30 if you're just that fed. They have a lot of AD damage and just want to have that extra survivability because you're one-shotting them anyways. That can be great. You can swap out these two or like build them later. You can go for the Edge of Night if the they are really impactful. Maybe they have a Carther that you like to not get poked massively for a fight. Maybe they have a Janna or a Nautilus or a Morgana Q, which you don't want to get hit by on your way in. That's when that's going to be really good. And as I talked about, as a more of a anti-AP item if you really need so, or you have enough damage already, and you just want that extra survivability because you're one-shotting. So it's a high risk, high reward build. Then finally you got the full crit, and it's kind of looking like this with the same options as the secondaries. You can also go for a Bloodthirster with this crit build because it's more about the auto attacks and the crits, and then lifesteal makes more sense. But in other builds, I don't recommend Bloodthirster, but you can do it. But this is my major issue with this build, is that it's so expensive compared to the other builds. Compared to hitting Opportunity into Ghostblade, and you're gonna have so much, like you're gonna hit it so much faster. You're gonna hit it like maybe 5 minutes faster than a Collector into an Infinity Edge, which is really the big issue here. So that's really gonna make the difference. It's strong when you do hit it, but I see it as if you have the other items, you're gonna get more damage because you're gonna get more kills in that time where you're not waiting for new items. So that wraps up Assassin. Let's go for Tank. Then finally we got Tank. It's not my favorite build in solo queue, but I know some of you out there enjoy it, so I decided to make it for you. And I do think this build is applicable in some scenarios where you simply just, maybe you picked Vi early, your team ends up drafting only squishes, you're the only frontline. I'm not saying you have to go this build if you're the only frontline every time. Sometimes I have 4 squish and I'll go lethality build regardless, because the enemy team is full squish as well. So it's like, you got 2 options. You can go tank, you can go lethality, but in some cases I do think tank is really useful. I've done it a couple of times. I got like 100% win rate on tank Vi because I only played it when it's really good, because it's not my most comfortable, and I don't like to put control onto my teammates, which you're kind of surrendering with this tank build. So one thing first is that you can't do just straight up tank items from the get-go. I do think that you have to go a Bruiser item first, and then you can opt into full tank. I recommend Black Cleaver or Sun Sky. These are pretty much the 2 options I see who are the most effective. You can do Trinity Force into full tank, but for the most part I think this is going to be better, because Trinity Force is more opted towards damage and DPS, and it's not what you want. It's not the most effective way to build tank Vi. I do like Black Cleaver. It offers you everything you want in the early game. You got damage, you got some haste to really back it up. Sun Sky, these are pretty similar, right? It's all depends, as I talked about earlier. Do you want the armor shred, or is it more towards burst? Is it sustained fights, or is it more towards like getting in those hits? If you can continuously hit more, I like Black Cleaver more. If you only can get in some hits there, some bursts there, I like Sun Sky more. If you want the Hunter's Ray, you still just go with Black Cleaver. Black Cleaver is the overall better item in my opinion, but you're gonna have some success with the Sun Sky as well. The good thing about Black Cleaver too is that it scales really well into the late game, so the Sun Sky, but even though they haven't built the army yet, you're gonna go into the tank items. So and you can't do it in the other order. You can't start with tank items, because then you're gonna have no clear in the jungle. You're gonna have no damage on your ganks. That's why you have to do Black Cleaver first, even though it's not necessarily the most efficient. It scales really well into the late game because people just get more and more armor just naturally, and then you can build your tank items. So what I've really enjoyed actually is to do Black Cleaver, and if you don't need MR more, if you need armor more, or maybe you built mercs because to get some MR and also against CC, I really enjoy Iceborne Gauntlet. This is just a really good item on this build. It's really cheap, gives you 300 HP, 50 armor, and also you can do Black Cleaver, and then you can start with your Sheen, because then you're gonna have burst and damage longer into the mid game, which you can snowball with, and you're still gonna opt into the tank build for the team fights and for your team. This is something I found really effective. And then you can round it out with other tank items. If you need more armor, you go more armor. I've talked about some of the tank items. We're gonna go back. So you got some different options. You got Frozen Heart, as I've been talking about. We've been talking about the differences between Frozen Heart and Randuin, so I'm not going to do it again. But yeah, you got the Randuins, you got Lockwood, which you can do for your team. You got Randuins, Thornmail, and as for MR items, we got Genic Rukern, as we talked about. We got Spirit's Visage. I've talked about when you want to do this and when not to, and then you got Sterax. So actually, Black Cleaver into Iceborne Gauntlet into Sterax has been my go-to in multiple games, because usually when you want to go tank build is actually also when Sterax is really good, because when you want to go tank build is when you really need to be a frontline for your team, but also the enemy team is really counting you, so you're not going to have the most amount of agency. You just need to be tanky. You're mostly about the ultimate. You can't really apply the rest of the Vi benefits to the team fights. You might be playing against the Morgana. They might have a lot of CC, like an Alistar and Leona. It's going to be very hard for you to actually play the team fights. They have a lot of mobility. Maybe playing against the Caitlyn Morgana or a Lux Caitlyn, it's very hard to play Bruiser into those fights, because you're not going to be able to land Qs. It's mostly about your ultimate. You just need to be the first guy in to just press R, get the fight starting, be as tanky as possible. Then Black Cleaver, Iceborne, and Sterax is going to be really good. Or you just skip the Iceborne Gauntlet, you go for Randuins, or then Sterax, or Randuins into Genic Rukern, and then into the Sterax. But yeah, this is my go-to way to play this build. These are pretty much the best tank items in general. Then you also got Jackshot naturally to wrap it up. Other than that, that's pretty much tank in my opinion. You pretty much decide whether you go Black Cleaver, Sun and Sky. I like Iceborne Gauntlet for the little bit of burst and stickiness. It works well with this build. If you don't want to, you want just pure tank items, you can do this sort of like this, for example. Just skip the Iceborne Gauntlet. This is also going to be really good first item, second item, third, fourth, or swap these if you need MR more than you need armor. And then you get the Sterax, because then you're going to have a lot of HP. You're going to be able to soak a lot of damage for your team. You also got, of course, Nice Vow, which works really good with this build. And also Zeke's conversion can work to just get that ultimate in. You got the Storm, just survive, soak some damage. I do think these offer more value, but there is some cases that this can be used. Let's talk about runes. Then we gotta talk about runes, and we're gonna start with the Bruiser build. As for runes there, you want to do Conquer. Many has been asking me about PTA, but PTA doesn't really do a whole lot when it comes to Vi, because it doesn't synergize well enough. Because when you go in with your Q, that's when you start off. Then you get your auto and your E. You got 2 stacks, but then you want to use your ultimate because you want to chain them and keep them close. And it's very hard to get in that extra auto. It doesn't make any sense. So you want to do Q, auto E, and then ult. Then you're gonna auto E, and then you press the attack on the on your second last auto before you E, and it doesn't really offer that much, because it doesn't make you've done most of your combo before you even proc the PTA. And if a rune is gonna, it's not like PTA is that strong that it's better to sacrifice the combo over another rune. So Conquer is just going to give you more, even though it's not perfect, because you would like to have the stats up front with Vi and not later into it. It's still going to do a whole lot more, because by the time you proc PTA, you're going to have a full stack Conquer, and a full stack Conquer is just better, and you're just going to do more with Conquer rune. Then secondary, you want to do Triumph. None of these really do a whole lot for Vi. Triumph is pretty good though. Alacrity, you want the attack speed. The haste isn't that impactful on Vi. You need the attack speed more for your jungle clear, and also just to do DPS. You also gonna naturally get a lot of haste into your build with your items. And then finally, I think many are a bit confused by these, but Coup de Grace doesn't make any sense on Vi. Not a whole lot, at least, because for the most part, you're one of the first to commit and actually do the damage. You're not like an executioner assassin. You're more of an, even when you play assassin build, you're more likely to get him from 100 to 20, than you are to getting them from 40 to 0. That's why coup de grace doesn't make any sense. You're the first one in, you do a full combo, and then you're kind of out of steam, and maybe you finish up, maybe you don't, but for the most part, you're going to do more damage when you're full HP than when they're low. You're not like a cleanup champion, like a Katarina, for example, or a Pike. You're more of a do a whole lot of burst, and then you just maybe die, but you save the team fight because you got off that much damage. And last stand doesn't either make much sense, even though you are able to stay low and like heal up with Thunder Sky and your passive and stay alive for a long time. That's not really when you do the most damage. You're not a sustained champion in that way, like a Kane or an Olaf. You're more of a you do the first combo. You start with the Q, auto E, and then you ult them, and then your team follow up later. It's not like you're the finisher, or you're able to stay alive and do your most damage when you're low and synergize in that way. You're more of a do damage when they're healthy, and then your team finishes it off. Or you just one-shot them, but you're still going to do more damage with the coup de grace. If they're 100 to 0, you're going to do more damage with Cutdown than you are going to do with one of the others. So that's why Cutdown is better on both Bruiser and Assassin, and even Tank if you go Conqueror. And then you got the secondary. You got a few options, but what I do in most of my games and what I just landed on, I've tried a lot of stuff. I tried every single one with a lot of different combos. I still land on Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight. It's pretty boring, but it just performs really well. The Magic Footwear is great because you can really rush that first item. Vi has one of the biggest power spikes when she completes one item in the game. That's why it's really good, and that extra move speed also is going to do wonder for you. And then you got Cosmic Insight, which is just great because Flash on Vi is one of the most important spells you have. You can do so much more with the Flash. You can even pop off some Instagram reels if you really want to. But in all seriousness, this is just doing so much. The Flash cooldown is really important, and also the Smite is actually pretty impactful because I don't realize this maybe, but you can do a 3-camp invade. Let's say you start on your red side. You're gonna do red Crux Raptor, for example. And then you might want to go for an invade. Maybe you play against a Silas or whoever you can invade and really kill early. Maybe a tank that's clearing really slowly. Then you can go into the red and you can have your smite when they're doing the red. And that's going to be really important sometimes. It gives you that option. But if you wouldn't have that, you don't have the smite to contest, and it's going to be a whole lot more difficult. And the same applies if they invade you. You're not going to have the smite. While they might have to have it if they're running Cosmic Insects. That's a really big advantage or disadvantage in those kind of matchups. And that early game level 3 fight can just decide the game. It builds the premise for the rest of the game. So Cosmic Insight is just amazing. If you want to try other stuff, I do like both Shield Bash and Conditioning. And also I do think Bone Plating and Shield Bash is a pretty good combo. Against assassins or champions with a lot of burst like Rengars and stuff. It can do good work, but I still I prefer Inspiration. You can also run stuff like Sudden Impact and Ultimate Hunter. In the Bruiser build, I've done this also quite a bit, but I prefer Cosmic Insight, and Magical Footwear is just more consistent in my opinion. This is reliant on getting ahead early, getting those kills to really get that ultimate cooldown, and it's very rare that those few seconds shaved off your ultimate cooldown is going to make the difference. Sometimes it is, but for the most part over an entire season, I don't think that's going to make the difference. You're going to be more consistent with the Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight. You also got the option of running Transcendence and Waterwalking, which I do think is really good, but still I'm siding with Inspiration on this one. And then for the minor runes, you're gonna have attack speed every time, adaptive force, and then I like to run the flat HP. The reason for this, it's not like the scaling is really bad, but this speeds up your jungle clear a lot in the early game, and also it might make the difference in those early fights, and then later you're gonna get the HP anyways, and more HP since you're getting so much HP in your build anyways, HP doesn't synergize with HP unless you have items that does it for you. So I think by the time you get there, the HP is less valuable than in the early game. That's why I prefer this. It might decide the game level 3 or 4, and it's also going to speed up your clear a lot, by the way. It's not a little bit, because it's going to save an auto in every comp, and that's pretty much just luck. The way of Vi's stats at the moment, and the way the pet works, it just saves you a lot of time, and it really does do the difference sometimes. Yeah, and also I forgot to mention, you do like to run those items that really synergize with the item haste, which Center Sky and Eclipse. So the other option you got, and this also works on Bruiser Vi, is Halo Blades. Maybe you don't like it, maybe you do. I really recommend it. I like it a lot, even when I'm playing Bruiser Vi. I'm just going to talk you through the runes first, and then I'm going to talk about when I go for Conqueror and when I go for Halo Blades. So Halo Blades is just very good because it allows you to get off that quick combos, and it's really good against champions with high mobility that you can't really stick on. It gives you massive amount of burst in the early game, which can be really impactful on the scouts, getting those extra auto too. And one of the absolute best things about Halo Blades is that you can do Q, auto E, and then ult before the enemy can use a flash, because it's just that fast, and it gives you so much faster combo, and also gives you other opportunities when you're diving, for example, to really, if they're 200 HP on the tower or 250, you can go for Q auto E and instantly flash. Maybe they have a CC, as with Conqueror, you would do a Q and then auto, and then they're gonna be able to retaliate or react to it. But they won't be able to if you have Halo Blade, so because you can get off the combo within the time of your CC from the knockback. So you can get the Q auto E without them being able to react to it or retaliate. And that's a really big advantage to Halo Blades, which can really give you some more options when you're ganking, especially when people are low. It gives you some other options. That's why I really like Halo Blades. And then you got Sun Impact. It just does more than the others. Sun Impact is really good on Vice Synergize with the Q auto. It has 10-second cooldown, but that's fine because Vice Q you got as well, and before the late game. Then you got Eyeball Collection. You can run Zombie Ward, but in my case, I feel like I'm just stacking this a whole lot faster, and it just does more. If you're running Umbral Cliff, you can run Zombie Ward, and it's gonna be a really nice combo, but for the most part, I like Eyeball Collection and the other items better. Then I like Relentless Hunter, but I'm not gonna give you shit for running any of these because they're all gonna be really good, but I do prefer the Relentless Hunter because Treasure Hunter, like with a Vi, just scales really well off completing items and getting items in general. But the thing is, I just think that Relentless Hunter is gonna give you, as long as it gives you one more kill, because of the move speed, then Treasure Hunter is gonna have more value in the game in total, and then you're just gonna have the stats for the rest of the game permanently as well. You can make the argument that you might be able to afford a Longsword, which wins you a fight, but just for the most part, I do think Relentless Hunter is just that strong in the jungle. It's not like you're perma-full clearing with Vi either. You might skip some camps you want to get to the fight because you're really strong, and I just think this is an amazing rune, and it's way too good in the jungle. Treasure Hunter is more for laners in my opinion, when you're not moving around that much. It's just Relentless Hunter is way too good as a jungler. You can run Ultimate Hunter because your ultimate is really long cooldown, especially if you're running runes, items like Opportunity, and yeah, we're going to talk about it when it comes to Assassin actually. But yeah, this is what I run. And then for secondaries, you've got a few options. You can run Magic Footwear and Cosmic Insight, but I'm such a big fan of Alacrity, I don't like to skip it. And then you can go Triumph and Alacrity, which I do most of the time, but I've also run Alacrity and Cutdown. These are the best combos in my opinion. You can do also this to just maximize damage, but I just have better performing better with Triumph and Alacrity over the entire season, and I got a lot of games and a lot of testing. I've been doing that since the start, and this is just what I've been landing on, and I do think it's for a reason. So when do you go which runes when you're running a Bruiser Vice? When you're running Trinity Force first item, this is the only build where you can't go both, in my opinion. You're just better off with Conqueror every time because you're getting that attack speed regardless. So you're not going to have the same effect from Halo Blades. You might have it at the very early game, but you're just quickly going to get it. Then you're going to have more out of the Conqueror for the rest of the game. So in that case, I just think Conqueror is better every time. For the other three items, it all comes down to what are the enemy team comp. Because both with Eclipse, Thunder Sky, and Black Cleaver, you can run both options. For the most part, I do think Black Cleaver build goes more into Conquer because you're more likely to play against those comps that when you opt for that type of item, because as I talked about, when you go Thunder Sky and Eclipse, it's more up to burst, it's more up to getting them. It's not going to be long extended fights. There's more mobility on the enemy team. It's more about they're more squishy. That's when I like to go that side. So it's more like Trinity Force and Black Cleaver. It's kind of, it's not that you have to go one or the other, but it's just they make sense in the same way as those runes do. They're kind of split. Halo Blades, Thunder Sky and Eclipse is burst, and Black Cleaver, Trinity Force and Conqueror is more DPS and extended fights. So that's pretty much how it goes. If the enemy team has a lot of melees, it's going to be long fights. You're going to be able to get in a lot of auto attacks. You go for Conqueror. If the enemy team is squishier, it's going to be they're more range. It's more about getting off one combo, and you're not going to be able to stick on them for very much longer. You're playing against more assassins, this type of stuff. The squishy, maybe they have a Quint top, maybe they have a Zed mid, maybe they have a, who knows, jungle. And then the bot lane is usually squishy. Maybe they have a enchanter or a mage in the support role. Then you're better off with the burst and then Halo Blades. Halo Blades, Conqueror, it just makes sense really. And as for Assassin, you're just running Halo Blades because when you go Assassin is when you want to burst and then you want to fast combos with it. So then I'm just running this every single time. I recommend you do the same. You can change this. It's the only thing I do recommend you can look into if you really want to, but I still just think Relentless Hunter is better, but change it up if you really want to. But the whole point of this guide is to make it simple too, and for you to know what to do, so you don't have to experiment a whole lot, because I've done it for you. I've put in the hours, so I just wanted to give you that clarity so you can go for it. You know it's going to work. This is not going to hold you back, because if I can get 600 LP with this build and these runes, then if you do the same, it's other stuff you can look at that's going to give you a better leverage as for getting LP. And then at last, again, we got tank, and then you really got two options. You got Conquer like this. It's going to be the same. Looks like this. This is your Conqueror, and then you got the last option, which is Aftershock, and it's gonna look like this. And I actually like to do Triumph and Alacrity, but I don't think you're wrong if you do this either. You can go for both. Personally, I just think Triumph and Alacrity is just that nice. I like them so much. It's gonna speed up clear, do a whole lot more in the early game, and it's just very nice. The thing about Aftershock is that the times I choose to go that tank builds, pure tank build and not Bruiser build, is also the same games where I think Aftershock is best. It's when you really counter as a champion, maybe playing as a Xayah and a Morgana, and they have a lot of CC everywhere, a Maokai, and top lane they maybe got an Olaf, which you can't fight at all. You just need to get in there and be tanky for your team. So if you're running into a lot of counters, you're not going to have a lot of value, and your team just needs a tank. I do think Aftershock with that pure tank build is really nice. So you can also do tank with Conquer build, but then I just recommend going the Bruiser builds instead, because that's when it's going to be good. So when Aftershock is good, it's also when the full tank build is good. They just make sense together in the same way that Halo Blades makes sense with Assassin. So don't fear going after Herc. It's actually really good. I've run this multiple times this season and it's doing great. So let's wrap it up. So we're finally here. I'm just going to mention my personal favorite build at the moment, and then after explain what the visual image kind of represents and what it means and how you should interpret it. So my personal favorite build at the moment is actually going Eclipse into Sundered Sky and then go into crit, because you get 100% crit, you got a lot of damage, you got a lot of burst, and then you have the Collector, Lord Dominic's, Infinity Edge, Death Dance more. All these items you can kind of do whatever you need most at the moment. You can also do Eclipse into Collector and then Sundered Sky, because you're really snowballing, for example. That's the way you can kind of mix it up. And you can also go just Eclipse, Sundered Sky, and then some crit item, then you get the more, because you really need the more on 4th or 5th, it doesn't matter. So let's talk about what the rest of the image means. So I just kind of named each build. The Trinity Force is the all-rounder, it just makes sense. And then I made a quick comment on what the enemy team comp kind of looks like. So for Trinity Force, everything is very basic, everything is very standard, and Trinity Force is very good. And then if the enemy team is very tanky and melee and you're kind of moving in that direction, Black Cleaver just gets better and better. That's when you might move from Trinity Force into Black Cleaver first item, and then you got Eclipse where they are squishy but also kind of melee and you can duel them. And then you got Sundered Sky, which I call the anti-counter build. If they have a lot of CC and they're kind of countering you in many ways, and but they have no armor at the same time, then Sundered Sky can be a decent first item. And then I just made the core build, so kind of the two first item for this build. You got two options on each, which I think is going to be the most likely in most games. I said it before, you can have other options if something is out of the ordinary, but this is going to be for most games what it looks like. And then I just made all the items together, kind of your options, the best items to kind of round out this build. Everything else, like out of the ordinary, I talked about in the video in more detail. But yeah, so the only difference here between all of these is the burst build, which I made two separate trees for the last items, because then I got the Eclipse Sundered Sky into crit build. You're not going to do that with Black Cleaver, so then it's more of a standard Bruiser build. So that's pretty much it. All the items at the end is not made like in order. These are just your best options. So that pretty much sums it up. I really hope you enjoyed this. If you want, as I said, another image for Assassin, for example, or you want to make some sort of altercations, if you want me to make changes to this, I can easily do it and then put a new link in the description. That's no problem. I hope this clarified things and made it simpler for you. If it didn't, hopefully it made you at least better at building and understand it better. That's the best I can ask. I really hope it helped you guys. So I'll see you in the next one and get out of here. Bye.